How did we get here? What happened?
I don't know if I can actually answer that, but it's an understanding I have developed over time and certain experiences. How have we come to this juncture, and how have the youth become affected by certain goings-on, politics or otherwise? Why religion plays such a great or prominent role. Now, in the olden days, when Russia first invaded Afghanistan, for example, people became aware through the media and videos which were smuggled in or created. And the young people, Muslims, in the context of Islam and Muslims, they became aware of two things, as they are still continuing to do so. One is that we are part of a nation, the Ummah. When a Muslim suffers in any part of the world, any part of the country, how other Muslims should relate to that is like a body where one part aches and the whole body complains or feels the pain. So there are many traditions like that where we Muslims are taught to appreciate the oneness of the Ummah. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, then we became aware of how the part of that Ummah is suffering. And they're suffering because they believe in God, because they want to be simple, devoted or devout Muslims. And there are those forces at play who not only don't want God, but they actually don't want Muslims, as it were, to flourish. And if they should want any Muslims to flourish, say in Afghanistan, apparently it has to be on their terms. What we didn't understand in those days, of course, in the early part, we saw the violence, we saw the Russian so-called atrocities. And some people would not like me saying so-called because they had committed atrocities and many civilians were killed in brutal ways. I say so-called because it's not one-sided. I mean, we heard stories even in those days of how Russian soldiers were flayed alive or burned to death. And we overlooked it because it's almost excusable. Didn't say so, but excusable because the proportion of suffering on the Muslim side was so vast and they were so helpless and so on. So we have the religious motivation, if you like, the catalyst, that we are part of our nation. Then we have this political awareness of part of our nation are suffering because some evil or wicked powers or people want to overrule the Islamic way of life or Muslim way of life. And you now have this nature within you to be helpful, to support, to bring justice. So Muslims have always, and I should say credit to them, wanted to be helpful and to support justice and to free the oppressed or remove the oppressors. But those kind of terms when we use loosely in a confused world, when we are led by ill-informed people are, when they are not as mature, educated, excited to think that they can contribute meaningfully and not told how to do so properly. It's like giving expensive toys or dangerous tools in the hands of children and they have been made excited. So we have all these problems. We had all these problems throughout, and those problems have just become worse. The problem I find, and we have the reason why some of us, quite a few of us actually, have pulled back or mellowed down or become, according to some people, sellouts or even apostates, is because as we grow older, we discover more than learn. We discover that the reality has always been different. There has never been actually this so-called glorious ummah that we talk about so much and put on a pedestal and extol the virtues of. If we look at a cursory glance at our history, Muslim history, when I say our history, I mean Muslim history, there are histories of people, of kings and rulers and nepotism to fights between brothers and who rules whom and so on. It was ugly. It was just as bad as anyone else whom we choose to criticize, whether the Crusaders or the Catholic Empire. It just depends. Let me look at our Ummah today. The glorious Ummah of the past, I don't know what was so glorious about it. We can talk about achievements. But then we have this propensity to ascribe achievements to people whom we in other contexts decry as not even being Muslims. He was a Sufi, he was a heretic, he was a deviant. But all of them suddenly become Muslim scholars, Muslim inventors, and Muslim this and Muslim that. So it's pick and choose. It's not consistent. The glorious Ummah of the past, it has its good points and demerits as well. Where is the glory of the Ummah today? I am ready to go and fight, and my heart should bleed, and I should pray for the success of Islam or Muslims as a religious person, as a believer, a faithful person. I want justice and mercy, not on my own terms, as God had shown through the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him. The problem is, I don't really know what God wants except what is stated in the text. In terms of understanding it and applying it, it's me bringing into play my intellect, rationalizing process, methods of interpretation, jurisprudence and everything. In the end, it's human agency interpreting the text. Where are those scholars and teachers who have shown how to contextually and soundly interpret what we claim to be the preserved, revealed words of God that can be applied for justice and mercy as the goal in the present context, whether Pakistan, Mecca, or in the streets of London? Because the Ummah, when we look at it, our current day Ummah, people, we are just as corrupt as anyone else. All the vices, all the bad things you can talk about that are found in other people are found amongst Muslims as well. Because we're all people. We have weaknesses, we have strengths, we have merits and demerits. To make it Muslims are good, non-Muslims are bad, it is so unjust, let alone superficial. So there is no glorious Ummah of the present day either. We need to understand that there is sincerity involved in the hearts of Muslims who want to bring a change for the better. The painful part of it is that sometimes much of it is also in terms of anger, the need for revenge, frustration. They're all negative qualities. So, yes, I went for fighting and I didn't get killed. I didn't even get injured. But that's not the point. The point is there are so many of us still exciting each other, young, exciting the young for this bravado in the name of Islam, glory of Islam and Ummah and so forth. And in the end, let's cut it down to the chase. The Afghanis, the Rohingyas, the Chechens or the Bosnians or Palestinians or Syrians, they don't and never needed you and me to be there physically to fight. Afghanis never needed us. You could have given them money and weapons, but you chose to go and fight them. Why? Because you were seeking martyrdom. But if you seek martyrdom through disobedience to God, leaving your parents crying, when it's not obligatory upon you, you can help people, from homeless people to people needing special education. At home, your neighbors, you neglect them. Your relatives, you neglect them. And you want to go and fight in some other country because you can't find any good cause. You can't make yourself worthwhile. You can't make yourself useful to anyone in Reading, not England, in Reading, where you're from. This is a foolish bravado. So I say to my younger brothers and sisters nowadays, it is good you have the spirit of jihad. Nobody's denying the example of the Prophet, peace be on him. He never did anything irresponsibly, certainly not with ignorance. We do things and we did do things irresponsibly and with ignorance, and we still do. That's the difference. It's not about disclaiming jihad or saying there's no jihad in Islam. Where is the jihad? There is no jihad anywhere in the Muslim world. How can there be? At least for jihad to happen properly, there has to be the caliph or the authority in place under whose leadership or banner you do these things. Anybody just comes along and jumps and says, I'm the leader, come and my merry men, let's go like Robin Hood. This is not how it is. That's how it is in the whole Muslim world now. Every Tom, Dick and Harry is a jihadi leader. So who is actually the truth? Who will you go and fight with? And I bet you, I guarantee, if you go to Egypt or Syria or Pakistan or somewhere, you will end up taking arms against other Muslims. You'll be taught that they are your rivals, they're in the way, they're against the Sunnah, they're against Muslim unity, they are sectarian. You will yourself be part of a sectarian process whereby you are the one wielding arms, doing far worse things than just being a common criminal like a thief or a pickpocket. Rather be a pickpocket and a thief than go around shedding blood of people in the name of God. You mentioned something about identity. There is a detachment from culture. And there is a lack of sense of belonging to your own country or place. That exacerbates, that kind of makes it worse. There is that, because people don't feel they sufficiently belong. It might be because of some ill treatment, bit of racism or bit of discrimination and so on that happens now and then. But then that's politicized and then made a big thing out of. So firstly, you have that level amongst the youth, I find, a kind of disconnect with society. And they're all become exploited by certain religious type people to create this us and them, love or hate kind of scenario. Because these people who are following a literal type of understanding of Islam, God says, Prophet said, black and white, and they're very much into this us and them. They are non-believers going to hell. We are Muslims all going to paradise. And it's like nothing grey, nothing to be understood, no virtue on the other side, nothing good to be found anywhere else, no beauty anywhere else to be even looked for. Very close-minded kind of thing. So those religious people come along and exploit those grievances. We have to look at the family structures of many of the Muslims in our country. What is it like at home? In terms of recognition, respect. The youth, do they have respect in the mosque to in their homes? They might have some love. There's a family and cordiality and so on. But in the end, what do they count for? Who are they? Are they somebody or nobody? Are they slapped around, shouted at, or are they treated like, yeah, you're a man of dignity or a woman of your independence thinking? By default, it's almost not there. And some things are worse than that, dysfunctional families. So you are nobody sometimes at home. You cannot be somebody in society. Oh, I couldn't get a job and I'm not good at studies. You don't feel at one with the culture because, Islam says I can't sing or dance, I have girlfriends, can I? Might be all true, but might not be as harsh as that. Then you have the problem with these three things of religious clerics coming along like myself and saying, well, God has given you a perfect way of life. Look how great the noble the ummah used to be and what great and glorious things awaits us if only you would just follow the Quran and the Sunnah. So they are now hyped up on a false sense of identity. They want meaning. And in latent, deep inside, they do want to be useful and meaningful and charitable or benevolent. But who's channeling them? You can't do something in your own country because they are the kuffar or the disbelievers, aren't they? You can't really connect with the culture because, this is all innovation. Let's go back to the prophetic time and recreate like some kind of period play, isn't it? Some scene from, 1,000 years back. This is how the model used to be. Now you find a cause. But all these things I mentioned, if we could now, in our education program, from school right down to the mosque, from an individual cleric to the grand mufti of wherever he is from, they should teach in their books and lectures, sermons, programs, activities, how to be a true Muslim family, how to love your own country, how most things are to be appreciated on their own merits because they are according to what God loves anyway. If you as a non-Muslim, I'm not saying that you are, but if you as a non-Muslim or an atheist even, do something charitable, isn't that to be admired? Am I supposed to, no, it's an atheist doing it, therefore it's horrible. No, the act is good and God loves kindness. We need to be taught to appreciate goodness wherever it is found. Who teaches me how to recognize wisdom? Because surely wisdom is truth, beauty, kindness, gentleness, all of these things. When we're not teaching these things, but just simply giving the hadith, that's the hadith, I know it, and then we pass it on to each other, and we all feel empowered, I know more about the Prophet than you do. It's very superficial, it's very almost soul-destroying. When we are taught to appreciate goodness, which we can do from looking at the Prophet's life, it's a different story altogether. That's not what's happening. So look at our home, look at our mosque teachings, look at how the religion is being taught, look at how we are separated from the culture and how much mess we have made in terms of not being able to identify culture with Islam, because we think Islam is totally separate from culture, and it is not. Most stuff in culture, if it's just based on common human practice, are not only acceptable, they're actually compulsory to be respected in Islam. These things are not taught because it's a bit more deeper, a bit more scholarly and a bit more above the teenager. But if you just show them a video of, look, what Assad's regime has done to the Mujahideen in Aleppo, we can all get excited. Let's kill Assad and his troops. So what have we reduced religion down to? What have we let ourselves succumb to instead? The baser feelings, the negative emotions. So this is what I think the problem is, the lack of identification with culture, problems at home, and then the perception of what's going on, then made worse by religious teaching, which is skewed and unbalanced, led by people who are not deeply researched or read, They have their own ulterior motives, or they're demagogues. They want power and they want recognition, because they're nobodies. In the end, everybody feels empowered. Somebody can become somebody great amongst their peers. So who cares what the mosque thinks, what home thinks? You and I, we together agree, we are doing the real thing. We'll go and fight or we'll blow some people in England, and that's it, we've got our martyrdom. It is a perversion of faith. It is truly a perversion of faith. And particularly, I don't want to sound racist or offensive, but the research, there are some research done, sociological research, which proves amongst the Punjabi, Pakistani more than in other cultural backgrounds in this country. The male thing about, because some of it's repressed sexuality, you can't have girlfriends, can't openly express feelings of love and sentiment like that, frowned upon, to taboo and all sorts of things. Yes, there are limits, there are rules and regulations about to what extent, to what degree, as prescribed in the Sharia. But on the other hand, there are also many modifications that can be had precisely because of understanding the spirit behind the aims, objectives and principles of the Sharia and so on. And there's also the attitude of how to accommodate lapses of such standards, if you like, because not all standards are meant to be applied at the same rigorous level. So masculinity, this repressed sexualism, trying to prove to the woman that I'm valiant or I'm brave or I'm somebody, is kind of wooing in a way. It figured a lot. It figured a lot in the early days. I remember, especially in some areas like Hounslow, Southall and so on, I used to go. Some of them used to go for training. And it was very easy in those days, before 9/11. Very easy to just hop onto a plane, go to Pakistan, come back 1 week later. Oh, I fired a few shots. But they would do that to impress the girls. And of course, oh, no, I know for a fact you did. Because that's one way of getting your partner. That's one way you would win your prospective wife. You're just trying to impress each other. I've been. Has he been? Hasn't he been? Who's been? What are you doing? It's a macho thing, isn't it? You're just trying to impress each other in the name of jihad and all that. It's not there. This is a very important point. There is repressed sexuality. There is that kind of feeling of, I want a girlfriend, I need to get married. Sometimes they're more puritanical than not. They just don't want to have a loose relationship. But it's repressed. And one way was to show, and then the girls would egg it on as well, I want to marry a mujahid. I want my husband to get married and then fight and then die and take me with you. So it was all a pretentious, make-believe, fake stuff. Everybody putting each other up and creating this scenario. It's like a club thing. If you're genuine, it would not be like that. What really makes us troubled is to think of how people have focused relentlessly on the suffering of their own kind, almost as if we are the only victims, and that is not something acceptable. Because when the Prophet, peace and blessings of God be upon him, stood his ground and called for the Sharia and tried to apply the law, the revelation in his society, it was for everyone, for the betterment of, for the comfort of, for the truth and justice of everyone. There are people suffering all over the world in many different arenas and contexts and situations. It seems the Muslims, we in general, don't have a voice for them. We don't want to represent them, let alone acknowledge. We don't want to acknowledge their difficulties, their problems. And our internal fights, we never talk about it. In Darfur, in Iran-Iraq war that happened, the Kuwaiti war that happened, now Syria and now Egypt. What are we supposed to do? Same with the refugees now, I find 60% of the refugees in Ipswich, in Suffolk, are Kurdish, Turkish people, Iraqi and Turkish and Syrian Kurdish people. Who takes care of them? And with a brother this, brother that, support fighting Syria. Why don't you support? There's not a single Muslim organization in Britain which supports the refugees, even just the Muslims, let alone other. They're Polish refugees, Lithuanian, Russian, nobody. All the council does it, a refugee forum and so on. And we are full of cynical talk about, the kuffar are this and Cameron or Blair are that. It's the system we're relying on. And here the people pay their taxes and people join 100,000 odd charities and there's nothing to be appreciated, nothing to be good found in this country. Why don't our imams teach this? Because I want my sons and daughters to grow up truly being loyal and British and happy and feeling proud, not in a negative sense, proud of being, yes, you're British Muslim. I'd rather be a British Muslim than a Bangladeshi Muslim or a Pakistani Muslim. It's not racism, because my country is great. My country is more humanitarian. My country does wonderful things. What have you done? Moaned and complained. So this is our responsibility now, I think, that we Muslims, people like myself, we do work, but it's very limited and we can only do so much. If we knew better, we would have never asked them to go. Now that we know better, I will never ask them to go. And you can call me a hypocrite, call me a kafir, and you can condemn me to hell, but I will not send people to death and misery and to be maimed for the sake of what?